One of the problems with a standard form is the fact that it is directly connected to the data in the table. And that means that if by any chance we wish to change a record in the table, then when we look at that data again, it's changed, which could cause us a bit of a problem. For example, I may be opening up someone's record, go for the details, and then accidentally lean on the keyboard. Ignoring the fact that I've just sent some other commands in, the fact is I've just lost the name there. If I decide in panic to close the form, then what I've successfully done is damage the data. Now I don't know who or what was the original name. Now clearly I can remember, but you can change data immediately, and that's one of the problems with this methodology, is because accidental erosion or even deliberate is easily undertaken with a standard form, this direct bound connection. We've already seen that we need to bind the data as such, the data to the forms, but do we actually need to bind the fields? Well, let's have a look. What we have here is each field is tied or bound to a field in the table itself. Str first name is actually a field within the TBL learner itself, and if you're not too sure of that, we go to design view. It's warning me, by the way, that I've got this open. That's fine, I only want to view, but there's str first name, str last name, and they are all related to fields in this section here. So when I open up the form makes a connection to the table and attaches the first record it is given. If we do one with the selection form, then it's actually told to do a search first, and then the form will load up with that record attached. The fields then will display the data from that record given the field name. So what we could do potentially is go to the property sheet, go to the data, and where it says str first name, the name of the field from the table, and simply delete this. You'll now notice that the field now says Unbound. That means that when I run this form, you can't actually see, there's no data there because this field is not attached to anything. It is an empty field. How does that help? Well, this is how it helps. What I'm going to do now is I'm now going to have a look at the code for this. So I'm going to actually, go to the form, go to event and on load. So when the form loads, it's at the current moment going to do nothing special, but I'm actually going to click on the 3 dots at the end and then go to code builder. I'm now looking at something called VBA, Visual Basic for Applications, and this is just a standard document. By the way, I had a flashing square there. That's because I had pressed the insert mode. This is what we call overwrite mode. If you ever see something that big, it means you're going to overwrite. To show you the difference for that, it's always useful to note is I'm just going to write the word duck in there. If I go to the middle and type in some letters, then the standard insert mode will give those letters in there. But if I press the insert key again, I go to overwrite, and then I'll end up overwriting the characters. So be aware, insert will switch that on and off. So anyway, VBA is a set of instructions that we can type in, and it's a special language. It's called Visual Basic, and VBA is short for Visual Basic for Applications. What this is when the form loads, it will look for something called form load and execute the code between this opening statement here and this end statement here. So what could that code do? Well, that code could do lots and lots of things, but what we're going to ask it to do first of all is I'm going to set up an area of memory, and I'm going to say to this area of memory, go to this area of, go to the memory, this is your RAM in your computer, and clear out an area of it. Prepare that area to receive data from a database, the record set. So be prepared to collect records from a database. The name here, RST, is short for record set, but I could have called this Swan. It actually doesn't make any difference. It's just that Over many years of programming in databases, RST is frequently used as a shorthand for record set, and it just allows me to remember that when I'm coding. I say it doesn't matter as regards the name. So I'm preparing this piece of memory in RAM, and there's a label pointing to it that says RST, and that area memory is ready to receive data, and data from the table that we're connected with. So what I'm going to then do is I'm simply going to set RST to a value, and that value is going to be current database dot open record set, and then I'm going to use something we've already seen before, a SQL command. Now I'm going to actually set a learner ID value, and I'm going to set it to 1. Now actually I can't remember if there is a record set 1, so what I'm going to quickly do is open this up, and what I'm looking at is this learner ID. In fact there isn't a 1, the lowest value is 3, and this is just for experimentation, just for testing. I'm going to set this value to 3. Oops, I forgot to end the brackets. There. And then all I'm going to do is put txt first dot value equals rst exclamation str first name. Now hopefully you recognize that this first part, this last part here, sorry, is the field name from the database TPL learner, that should be. So this is the field name from this table. So all I'm saying is inside, once it loads this data from here, so it opens up the database, it runs this select, and it selects all the data from this table which matches this criteria where learner ID is equal to 3. That means it's going to pull in this entire row of data and put that into memory. Then what's going to happen is it's going to go to this line, and it's going to find the one bit of data that has this label, and that's going to be this piece here. I know it says first name up there, but if you remember, it's going to complain, but that's okay. That's actually str first name. So I can see that that's the field first name, str first name. So it's going to take the value that is in memory for that label, and it's going to store it in a text txt first dot value. So the question is, what is this txt first dot value? Well, the answer is actually quite simple. It's this. And how do I know it's this? Because if I look at the property sheet, I can see the name here in the text box. But equally, if I go to other, name txt first, so I can see the name of this text box. And this is an important thing to do with these boxes. If you haven't already, if the system doesn't allocate the names properly, then do go through checking these names off. I've actually called them all things like this: txt last, txt tell. If I've got these and got these written down somewhere, then what I can easily do is write a little bit of code. I don't need to remember this set RST or anything else like that, because all I've got to do is have a printout with that, always referring to it. And once you start using it, it's very easy. So all this is going to do is pull this data in. I'm now going to close this down, and I'm going to run this form. Now we can see that I changed it to Mick and Mouse. Now the first thing you're going to note is I can change that to Mickey. But if I close this down and reopen it, it still says Mick. So I've solved my first problem. But surely it's still pulling the data up. Well, actually no, if I go to the next one, it's still saying Mick because I tied it to that first record. That should say Minnie. So you can see that actually I've tied it to that record. So how can I actually get this to work effectively? Well, let's have a look back at our selection form. Do you remember we related this, when we created this button, we related learner ID to learner ID. So all I've got to remember is that there is a learner ID on this system. All I've got to remember is that there is a field called learner ID that I can tie this to. And what I'm going to do, and we've already previously looked at concatenation. This is the same way of doing things. I'm going to concatenate to the end of this. Now if I've got that right, I should be able to close this down and I should be able to view this. It still says MIC, but now it still says MIC because it's tied to that. That's what the code's telling it to do. But I should be able to go to the select a record, and that should now pull up the name Helen. It's not working through these because these are only moving the records inside the sheet, but this has already done this work. The form doesn't reload. So when I click on these, it's not reloading the form, and of course the code that I've written only works when the form loads. So these are no use to me, but then again I wouldn't want these. I don't want someone to be able to go through my records one either way. They shouldn't be there. My system should allow me to select it on this form and then pull it up in this form. So how can I add more to this? I mean, there's not just this first name. How do I actually add more to this system? Well, it's actually exactly the same way. I go to the str last name, I look for data, and I simply delete anything that's in the control source box. It's then unbound. I then can go to the code. I can actually copy this line if I wish to. And if I remember, that was called txt last, so I can call this one txt last str last name. You can start to see hopefully why it's important to write these things down, have some designs, because then at least you know what's talking to what. But I could keep doing this. Does that work for every instance? Well, of course it does. Now, Helen Troy. It keeps asking me to save because of course I'm changing the structure of the system, not because I'm saving a record. So what I have here is the ability to select a record. Let's go for Frank Jones, and it will pull up both pieces of data, and I can do that for all of these fields, and then I can't corrupt the data. As we've already seen, Mick Mouse is still Mick Mouse. It doesn't matter what I do to that. I can delete it all. I can type a load of things in. I can do that for Squeak Road, which is still tied to the system. Close that down, reopen it. Mick Mouse is still there, but the street has become corrupted. So I've got a safe way of allowing someone to see the data but not corrupt it, not unless I want them to. And obviously the next stage after this is to add a save function, an ability to save the data, to say yes, this is the right data. And that's the next thing that we're going to do.